Well, it's the 23rd of July today, and I'm here once again in the Sherwood Forest Country Park. I'm about halfway up Broad Drive. There will be a map in a few minutes' time. Come to show today because it's quite breezy. You may well hear the wind blowing through the tops of the trees at times during the course of this video. So it's easier to find somewhere nice and sheltered to trap within the confines of the ancient trees and woodland that is Sherwood Forest Country Park. So hopefully we should be in for a decent couple of hours. Now, as you can see, it's a slightly different setup this evening. I've decided to utilise one of the numerous gates and fences that there are in the country park here and drape the sheet over that. It's quite useful actually. It makes the moths generally easier to see and to pick out. The only disadvantage is that you lose some moths frustratingly at the back of the sheet. Quite often something looks good, disappears at the back of the sheet and is never seen again. But it does allow for easier picking out of those special moths, and I'm sure we should get some decent moths to show you this evening. It's a lovely, mild, if not warm night, so hopefully the rain will keep off and the moths will come in. Now here's a very common moth that you'll get at any light trap operated and run in July, and this is scarce footman, which is very similar, especially in coloration, to common footman, and it's quite often a beginner's mistake in separating the two. But they are easy to separate, and that's on their resting position rather than in the coloration of the wings and the head and the body. In scarce footman, which this one is, they always rest with the wings rolled around the abdomen, unlike common footman, which rests in the typical wings flat position assumed by footmen. It's a very common species. It's increased in recent years, scarce footman, and you'll get this almost nightly during the flying season, pretty much in any trap wherever it's run in any location. Very much a success story of recent years, scarce footman. Well, it's been a slow start, but steadily a few things are starting to appear on the sheet. Most notably, 2 sexton beetles have been here since the light was switched on, both suitably attired in mites. It's mostly micros that are in. Endotrichua Flamiales, which if a decently marked one comes in, I'll probably show you. It's very characteristic of what we get here at Sherwood. It's also very common, and probably one of the commonest species here tonight, but there's not a great deal at the moment. But it is early days. One rather special moth that I have got, and it's in a container, is a female pine hawk moth. I'm waiting for her to settle down, and then hopefully if she settles down we can get her out and have a look. Now here's a nice moth that's been very cooperative actually. It's sort of plonked on the sheet and hasn't moved since. It's the kind of moth that I really appreciate. It makes my work producing these videos a lot easier. And this is a species that I saw last time we trapped at Sherwood, and it's a green silverline, just starting to show signs of fading and wear now, but it's still an extremely attractive moth. I do have a thing for green moths, I don't know why. They're always beautiful, What makes these so nice is that pink antenna that they have. It's a really attractive species. Now, I don't like to show you moths that are upside down, but this is a really lovely, attractive moth, and it's Colisena Quirkana. Looks every inch the Tortrix, but it isn't. It's a separate family whose name completely eludes me. But this is a species to learn, and certainly in woodland sites such as Sherwood Forest you'll get this in varying numbers, but it will occasionally turn up at urban sites. I get it on the odd occasion at home at Market Warsop. But it's a lovely moth, beautifully patterned and coloured in shades of sort of pinks, with those sort of yellow dots on the edges of the forewings, and then there's that sort of reddish pink edge into the rear of the forewings. It's a lovely thing. That's Colisena Quirkana. Now here's a moth that's personally quite special to me, because Dilys and I trapped one of these, which was the first in Nottinghamshire for many years, and quite coincidentally we trapped ours the night before the county recorder trapped one at some location. I can't think where it was, but suddenly Nottinghamshire was once again graced with the presence of this moth, which is a black arches, and this is a male. It's unmistakable, and especially with those antennae, how those antennae are feathered, quite remarkable. But the record that Dilys and I had at Loudwood was the first in Nottinghamshire for many, many decades, and then all of a sudden it started to spring up everywhere, all out of the blue, or the black, you could say, being a moth. And this moth started to appear everywhere. We recorded it numerous times in the Eakern area at the time, and then started to record it from Sherwood Forest as well, and I think records from Ravenshead soon followed, and elsewhere in the county, and it's now quite an expected moth at many sites, but especially in the Sherwood Forest area. It's a beautiful thing. The females are very different to these, although marked similarly. The female is more that creamy white colour, and the black markings are considerably less on the females. It's a beautiful thing. So that's a black arches, and I'm pleased to see that arrive at the trap. Well, while I pour myself out a cup of coffee, that's the overall scene that you're viewing. Obviously, being in Sherwood, it's virtually all oak that I'm trapping underneath, all ancient oak as well, or at least oaks of upwards of about 50 years, but mostly ancients in this area. There's a few silver birches all this side of the fence, so that allows for variety, but it's starting to fill up the sheet, but at the moment slightly disappointing, I suppose. Something's just thudded onto the sheet. That looks suspiciously like drinker moth to me. It'll no doubt proceed to bash itself around as male drinker moths do when they come into the light. There's two pine hawk moths which won't settle down at all. In fact, one has gone off up, but I have kept the other one, the female. I'd like to try and get some eggs. It'd be nice to rear those caterpillars again. It's a beautiful caterpillar, is pine hawk moth. I'm continuing the theme of black and white moths while this one has stayed put. This is a clouded border, and it's a beautiful little moth, completely white or creamy white, with various sort of blackish dark brown markings around the hind wings and the forewings. It's a bit like the Frisian cow of the moth world, really, but it's a lovely thing. I recently found a larva of this moth. It clips an old quarter. This is another moth you'll get occasionally in urban gardens. I get it at home, but not frequently. However, on a woodland setting such as this, you can expect it, and usually in fairly good numbers. This is clouded border. It's another lovely moth. Now, I'm trying to arrange this so this moth is sat nicely but beautifully marked, isn't it, this? And this is lesser swallow prominent. Now there's two swallow prominents, this swallow prominent, and there's this one, lesser swallow prominent. The two are quite difficult to tell apart, but on this one it's that sort of that large, quite thick wedge of white tends to give this away, but there are subtle differences. That's not a totally reliable means of identification, but it is a lovely species, and it's common here at Sherwood, and it's also a moth that will turn up in most people's gardens at some time. I get it at home, but it's a lovely thing. I do love the prominence. There's a number of species and they're all quite attractively marked, but this is beautiful. It's sort of covered in whites and various shades of browns through to black. Lovely. Well, just gone over 30 species. We're on to, 31 species by the looks of it. Nothing unusual that's coming. And 30 for July in Sherwood Forest is absolutely terribly poor. It's no doubt that a lot of it is down to the very dry conditions that we've had. There's no doubt whatsoever in my mind about that. It shortens the flight times of species quite considerably, especially that there's been no moisture at all. Sherwood Forest is on very dry sandy soils anyway, so the number of species coming in is still very low, but it's early days yet. But at the moment it's pretty much typical fare for what you'd expect, just not in the numbers. However, there are quite a lot of shield bugs and several of the Curculio weevils, Curculio villosus and Curculio nucum, which quite commonly arrive on the sheet, especially when you're trapping under oaks such as I am. But although the sheet might look busy, it really isn't. There's only a handful of the grass veneers, the crambids, and normally by now you'd expect a sheet full of crambids, but again there's not much grass here, at least grass that Tom Jones could sing about. Now here's Endotrichua Flamiales. I'll try and get the sheet to sort of hold still so you get an idea of how this moth sits, because it doesn't sit flat to the sheet. If I can sort of twist it round, you can see how it sits proud a little bit. That's often the big giveaway to this moth, but it's quite a typical stance with many pyralids, of which this moth is one of. It's also one of the two species that are dominating the sheet here. It's in good numbers and usually always is at Sherwood. It's immensely common and almost as easily disturbed during the day from rough vegetation as it is attracted to light. And Endotrichua Flamiales, it will occur quite readily in gardens. I get it at home in varying numbers most nights. Some specimens can be really well marked. You can just about make out the sort of two-toned nature of this moth, but some are very striking, usually fresh specimens. Others are nothing at all to look at, with few discernible features, but for many of you it'll be the stance and posture of this moth at rest that will give its identity away. Here's what many might think is a strange visitor to the light, but these do occasionally turn up. And this is an oak bush cricket, and this is an immature female by the looks of it. Probably got one more molt to go. They do get to quite a size, these. But what I have seen recently, in the last couple of days, I've seen 3 of these. It was when I visited Holborn Hill and Hanger Hill plantations, and the 3 that I saw all looked as though they'd failed the molts and were crippled and deformed, and I think that was down to dryness. This one though seems to be okay, has the right amount of legs, and the wings are developing nicely, and the ovipositor is already present, so hopefully this one might be alright now we've had a sprinkling of rain. But it's surprising what turns up at light. Well, it remains extremely steady, approaching about midnight-ish, and the rain so far has held off. I don't think they're expecting much anyway here in Nottinghamshire, mainly in the northwest, that might get a decent amount. Here though, at the moment it's dry at least. Still not a great deal in the way of species. It's very disappointing, and shows what a difference the weather does make given the right conditions, bearing in mind that on the 19th, I think it was, in my terrace house garden, I got virtually 80 species, which I've still got to write up and put on the website, but I'm very slow in my old age nowadays. And here we are in Sherwood Forest, in what's supposedly one of the best areas of its type in the UK for sort of this ancient woodland, and yet I've only got just over 30 species. I'm struggling towards 40 at the moment. But if I didn't record micros, you could half that. I probably haven't even got 20 species of macros. But it's all down to the weather, plus the variances of year to year, always very different. No 2 years are ever the same, no 2 nights trapping are usually the same. But it's very clear that moths have been considerably affected by the weather that we've had of recent weeks, and that effect will run on through the egg and through the larval stage. You can probably expect low numbers of many species that are flying now next year, and that's purely down to the weather. Well, moths are still dropping in, of course, not in no real big numbers, not what I'd have expected, or indeed what I did expect before coming here this evening. Overall, I suppose this has been quite a disappointing session in terms of species. Nothing remotely interesting really, or particularly rare. But that's how it goes sometimes. It's an unpredictable hobby or pastime, moth trapping. You never really know what you're going to get. But as I've said before, there's always another day.